Kathy, good evening, everyone. Hugs and stitches to all of you.
Okay, Walt, our sound is bad.
Hey, Kath, I'm going to try to turn it up. I think someone else's phone line is open.
I've got, let's see. No, everybody else is finally in mute mode. I think we're okay, Walt.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Perfect.
Okay, that's great. Good evening, everyone. Hugs and stitches to you. Your software is loaded. Now what? Look, I want to cover different features within the software, but the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the My Floriani Today page. This is an amazing page, and I'd like to kind of quickly review or show you the different things that you have on here. Number one, up at the top here in the What's New in Floriani. Certainly, one of the highlights to Floriani software is that you indeed receive free updates. Every time that we release an update, by clicking on the What's New in Floriani, I'll go ahead and do that. It will show you the update example, the last update to Suite. You receive your Applet Stitch tool, your numbered sequence view. It will explain those updates, and it will explain every bit of information on utilizing that new part of the software. You can also, and I'll scroll down here to the bottom, you can also review previous updates simply by clicking on the click here to see previous updates made to Floriani. That will cover the last updates that indeed were loaded into the Floriani software. So again, all of your updates are released to you, and the information on them are in the What's New in Floriani area on the My Floriani Today page. Down below that, I'm not going to open up all these, folks. I just want to explain them, is your download Floriani workbook and lesson files. A couple of things here. Indeed, this is where you download the workbook. There is, and we'll get to this in a minute, but there is embedded in the software a 400-page manual that was embedded into the root of the software. It has some amazing value. I'll get back to that in a minute, but this workbook supersedes the internal implanted workbook in the software. Let me just explain one thing. When you go in to download your workbook and lesson files, those of you who have purchased Suite, make sure that you download the one that just says Suite. There are 7 elements to the Floriani software line. I had one student at a class come in and tell me, my gosh, it was a 1,000-page workbook. It's not. If you take the time to download all the individual elements and then the Suite, you'll end up with 800 to 1,000 pages. Make sure that you download the one that just says Suite. That will cover in entirety all of the elements of the software. It is a 200 plus page workbook. Below that, the Live with Walter Floriani webinar training. Obviously, most of you have been there in order to be attending the webinar, but I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Indeed, if you find that you are not invited to one of the webinars, or if you've missed one, make sure that you go to this area and that you register for the webinars. You will see on this page a list of the upcoming webinars that we have scheduled throughout the year, but a very important new feature on here is right up here at the top. Here are our previous webinars. Look, we do everything we can to view or to video all of the webinars. If you miss one, you can click on there and view the webinars. We do occasionally have issues with recording the webinars occasionally. I apologize for that, but the reason for that is that Kathy is in one location. I am many times in another location. DJ, who's operating or the command module, so to speak, is in another location. My gosh, I've actually given a webinar from an airplane when we were stuck on the tarmac in Chicago. So if we ever are not able to capture a video, it's simply because of again, Kathy might be in one place, I'm in another, and there is some logistics that might hinder that. But that is your Live with Floriani, Walter Floriani webinar training. Down there is your support forum. Now look, the support forum is a wonderful place where you can network with other users of the software, our support staff. We have an amazing group of moderators who are there to help you. This is also, in my opinion, a wonderful learning tool within the software. People who work the software and our moderators are very skilled. You can get onto that support forum. You can talk about the software. You can ask questions. Many times you'll be amazed at the kind of response you'll get even from other users of the software. You are a great group, and everyone is willing to share. Please take advantage of our support forum. The online manual, again, is the embedded manual that was initially implanted into the software. Excuse me, we cannot access that manual. So why it's to some extent superseded by the workbook is that the workbook can currently keep up with all the updates. When we release an update, we cannot input it into that internally embedded manual. But let me explain. That manual, you know what, I'll go ahead and click on it. That internally embedded manual does have some wonderful intrinsic value. There is an entire series of lessons in here. If I go into just even say the Digitizing Pro, you get some quick start lessons. The quick start lessons are amazing. It's a group of lessons certainly to learn the software. There are designs that go with those lessons. All of those designs are already embedded in your software. Everything links right to where it should be. They're wonderful lessons. I think this is a great place to go. Also, just an example, like under the Lettering Pro module, and realize you'll see the different modules. When you own Suite, you own all of those modules. So you can go into the individual modules and get your lessons from there. But an example, in the Lettering Pro module, you can click on fonts, and you can see the fonts that are indeed within the software. Now, you're not going to see all of them because we've added new fonts, but you can print out yourself a nice list of the fonts. Again, the online manual area is the embedded manual within the software. It has some wonderful intrinsic value to it. Down below that, you have your software support. This is a very, very important aspect of the My Floriani Today page. If you have any issue with the software, if you have an idea for the software, if you need a new code because you bought a new computer, if you have any registering issues, please do it on this software support page. It will generate a work ticket. At that point, it knows it needs to be handled, and Karen and her team will go to work on it. And a few things about Floriani software support that I am very, very proud of. First of all, Floriani software support is here in the United States. A lot of software support is offshore. Ours is here. Also, you will find, and I will tell you from traveling around this country, I have never heard a negative about our software support. Karen, and I know you're listening, you have done a magnificent job. You and Bob, everyone involved in software support, you're incredible. I don't know how we could do what we do without you, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Sorry to deviate a little bit, folks, but they deserve as much praise as they can get. Certainly for me, I don't get to talk to them enough. You guys are great. Our software support is amazing. I swear you will think they are working 24/7. Frequently asked questions, indeed.
Walter, you need to get closer to your microphone.
No problem.
Get a little closer to your mic.
Can you hear me better now?
Little better, yes, that's better.
Well, you know what? When I give a speech, you know, I tend to move around the room, so it's not much different when I'm doing a webinar. Let me pull this just a little bit closer. I think you'll be able to hear me fine now. The FAQ, the frequently asked questions area, is indeed that. It's just frequently asked questions. This needs to be updated. It hasn't had a lot of new updates into it, but there are some great answers to certainly frequently asked questions. Down below that, the tips and tricks area. Basically, this is going to tell you to get involved in the forum. Really, from a standpoint of tips, tricks, and support, the forum is indeed the place to go. This is going to basically tell you and link you to the forum. But then below that, Floriani Digitizing Depot. This is a digitizing company that we have contracted and we worked with. When you're first getting started digitizing, occasionally you may have a design that can be fairly complex. This is a company that I've known the owner for many, many years. He is a dear friend of mine. He is a master digitizer. He started a business overseas, a digitizing business. They purchased our software. We personally trained their digitizers on the software. If you have needs to have a design created, and again, many designs that seem complex, having that design digitized for you can be a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information. It can help you learn aspects of digitizing that you won't believe. I'm going to get back to that in just a moment or two. We'll get back to this, having a design digitized for you. But take advantage of them, folks. Their pricing is unbelievable. Their work is unbelievable. They are master digitizers. The young men and women that work for him are incredible. Take advantage of it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The other thing that I'd like to discuss, a couple of other things. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see your stock design. Every month, as a purchaser of Floriani's embroidery suite, you get 5 new stock embroidery designs from us. But many of you may not know that by clicking on that box, you will open up all of the designs released since we started this program. We started this program almost 3 years ago. In fact, as of October, it will be 3 years that we began to issue the free stock design service. As we scroll down, or as I scroll down, these are all the designs released. Does not matter when you purchase the software. When you purchase Floriani software, you gain access into all of the designs that were released since the inception of the process. So you can, and I'll scroll down to the bottom, you can go in and you can download every one of these designs. I think that's amazing, and I am going to get back to this in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk about these free stock designs in a little more depth. I'll get back to that in a minute. I'm going to close that out, get back to the My Floriani Today page. The only other thing that I want to discuss down here is on the bottom. When you click on Create a New Design, that's like just being in the software and hitting File and New. Open a design. Just like being in the software and hitting File and Open, it will take you to the area where you can indeed open up existing designs. Open Recently Used will open the last design that you were working on. What's New takes you to the What's New in Floriani page. And then finally, the Help icon, Help again, takes you to the embedded manual that is embedded into the root program of the software. And that is indeed your My Floriani Today page. Now, one other thing. Up here at the top of the page, your software update history. If you go into that, again, you will see the most recent update. It also will link you to the previous updates associated with Embroidery Suite only. You can utilize that without a doubt. I'm going to go ahead and close that. The next thing that I'd like to discuss, folks, are the educational aspects of the software and all that is available to you. And I guess, again, we'll start with the workbook. Going to that My Floriani Today page, downloading your workbook. It is a magnificent workbook written by DJ Anderson. DJ is an unbelievable young man who sits next to me, works with me, hand in hand on the software. Many of the updates, many of the features in there. Look, while it's Floriani software, I have always stated that once you purchase it, it's your software too. Many of the updates have come right from our users. Many of the updates come from our educators. Many have come from Kathy, Karen. We're all involved in making the software better. But a big part of that is based on DJ. And again, I will applaud him. Without DJ, our software would not be what it is today. I'm very proud to have DJ on our staff. So you've got your workbook. Also, educationally, you have your videos. Now, I'm going to click on the video icon up here on the top of the screen. This will link you to all of the videos embedded in the software. And I apologize, I do not have all my videos put in there. This is the computer that I shoot the videos on. If I had all the videos in there, I would be out of space on my computer already. But example, the way the videos work, clicking on like Lettering Pro to learn just even basic lettering creation. Click on it, you'll hear a lovely young lady start to speak to you.
Click on
and you can learn the software through indeed the videos. But below that, you also have the area called Walt's Corner. Embedded in your software is over 5 hours of video education that I have personally produced. In fact, many of the questions that come over the forum will end up on my desk, come to me. I answer them with videos. I will email you that video initially upon completion, but then they get implanted into the Walt's Corner area within the software. Now, the 5.5 hours of videos implanted in there are the videos implanted in there, but all new videos that I produce down here on the bottom of your video page, if you click on the Walt's Corner, you will see all the newest released videos. I have just completed additional hours of video training that will begin to get updated, and the videos are just going to continue to get deeper and deeper and more as time goes on. I love the videos. DJ and I personally work very hard to bring these videos to you and get them initially put into the software. We're very proud of our level of education that we can bring you with the videos. So you have your video education. You also have, though, in the software, the webinars that you're currently listening to. I think that webinars are our future, certainly for advanced education. While I would travel around the country and give advanced classes, being able to bring advanced classes to you in video or in webinar form will allow me to grab people from all over the country, put a nice big class together. Really, the webinars are just getting started. I continually try to talk a little slower, to take my time. Please understand, I get a little excited. Once I start going and start educating, I tend to speed up, talk kind of fast. I'm doing my very best to learn to slow down and take my time with this. The video education is just going to get bigger, and I promise you it's going to get better. So you've got your workbook, you've got your videos, you've got your webinars. I also cannot stress again the forum. The forum, in my opinion, is not just a place to network. It is a place indeed to learn, and certainly the last presentable normal form of education are the classes that many of the dealers and more are taking part of this. Kathy produces a wonderful monthly lesson. Many of our dealers provide for you monthly classes. They're project-oriented. They are amazing. If you have not attended one, please contact your dealer. See indeed if they do provide for you the classes, and get involved, folks. Look, when we produce this software, the one thing that I stress so much and have continually pushed is we want you to work with it. We want you to use the software. So much embroidery software is out there, and I do not see it always being utilized. We want you to use Floriani software, folks. It's simple software. It's elevated software. It's going to continue to grow, but really, we want you to use it. Take advantage of the classes. But now, I'd like to address a couple of areas of education within the software that you can take advantage of. And the first thing is a little bit of an advanced class that I teach that I simply call, well, it's advanced education, but it's a self-learning technique. Look, I'm going to take a few minutes to explain this, but my point is that we all have at home good running data. We all have designs that we love to run. Don't you put designs on your machine occasionally and go, oh my gosh, that ran so magnificently. I wish all my embroidery designs ran like this. We all have designs we love to run. We also all have designs, and we hope to God we never put on that embroidery machine again. Well, look, from this point forward, if you take a few minutes, listen to me, and watch what I'm about to show you, every good running design, the secret of what that digitizer, he or she may know, is in their embroidery design. Let me take a few minutes and show you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up a design, just a very simple lettering design. This is a design, a part of a design, one of a very famous, my Columbine logo, a very famous design of mine. But let's say you ran this lettering design and you said to yourself, oh my gosh, you know what? That Floriani guy may not be that pretty, but he sure knows his embroidery. And you may feel, look, if ever given the opportunity, I would love to learn from Walter Floriani. I'd love to sit down next to that man one-on-one and learn what he knows about embroidery and about digitizing. Well, look, if you have an embroidery design that I have produced or that I have digitized, everything I know about the process, folks, is in my design. So let's say, number one, you run this design, and it runs like a dream. You take it out of the hoop, and you feel of it, and it feels like butter. It's just so soft. It's not bulletproof. It just feels so soft and just bends in your hand so easily. And structurally, when you ran it, it just ran so beautiful. And again, you'll say to yourself, I want all my embroidery designs to run like this. Well, look, this is all you have to do. I'm going to zoom into the W here. And again, you ran it. It's soft like butter. Well, obviously, I've used satin stitching in here. The first thing that you have to know is what density that I utilize. Now, I'm going to teach you a little bit about my measurement theory of embroidery creation. Those of you who own my book, those of you who have studied from me in the classes that I teach around the country know that I teach a theory that I developed called the measurement theory of embroidery creation and control. It's also the theory and the technique that the software is developed on. Well, the thing that you need to know about this satin stitching, the first thing is the density. What density did I use? Now, the first thing when you learn to measure, because I'm going to teach you a little bit about measuring your embroidery, is there's one basic rule. You need to measure metrically. Now, you do not have to understand metric measurements, but let me explain. Everything about embroidery and embroidery machine and embroidery software is based on the metric measurement system. Densities are set metrically. The machinery was developed in Europe. It was developed metrically. Now, in a lot of embroidery software, it was always difficult to go from metric to inches or vice versa. Look, I work metrically, but I think in inches. So I wanted within the software the ability to go from metric to inches or vice versa to be very simple and very quick. So originally, it was under tools and general options. And right here, you could toggle from metric to inches just by selecting it there and clicking OK. But in the very first update that we released, we simplified that. All you have to do to go from metric to inches now within the software is come to this margin area on the left or up here on the top right where my cursor is or my arrow is. Simply right-click and you can toggle from metric to inches there. So you'll see that indeed I'm in metric. So we zoom into the design. At this point, folks, grab the ruler. The ruler in your software is over here on your lettering side or on your editing icon side. Simply select your ruler. Go to any stitch along the edge of that satin stitch. Now, a rule for measuring density on satin stitches. Always do it along the straight edge of a satin stitch. So, and what I mean by that is don't measure your density around the corner of an E or on an O. You want to look for a straight edge, an I, a W, a V, an A. So I place the cursor on a stitch. Just any stitch along the edge of that letter W or on that W. Left click and hold it and simply pull down and measure the distance to the stitch down below it, and you'll see that it says 0.5. Folks, that's my density. Density, as simply as I can put it, is the distance between the stitches along the edge of the structure. Never measure density in the center of a structure, always do it along the edge. So the density there is 0.5. So you know what? At this point in time, go into your satin stitching in the software and set your density to 0.5. I hope you all understand that when you do that, basically what you've just done is you've just duplicated the density, okay, within that design. You've duplicated my density. That's one of the factors that I digitized with. Now, you see the stitching underneath the top stitching. Folks, those are my underlay. Underlay are executed with running stitches. Those of you who have my book and have read it know that one of the rules to the running stitch is length. Length equals loss. So what you also need to know about this design is the stitch length that I utilized in my underlay. Length equals loft. The longer the underlay, the greater the lofting value it gives to the stitching going on top of it. Elongated stitches, long stitches, yield wonderful lofting value. Short stitches yield very little lofting value. So over here on your editing icons, you have this icon right here which says stitch ends. Stitch end, folks, are actually needle penetration points. It's every place that I have dropped the stitch within that design. So mark your needle penetration points, and you'll see that they actually just come right up there. You know what? Once again, grab your ruler. Go to any stitch along that underlay line and measure the distance to the next stitch, and you'll see that it's 3 millimeters. Well, again, folks, that's the stitch length of my underlay. You now know another value of how I digitize. So very simply, go into the running stitch in your software and stitch your stitch length to 3 millimeters. You've just duplicated my underlay length, my running stitch length. Now, you only need to know one other thing, and that is how I've digitized the design. How we learn that is under View, and the process is simply called Slow Redraw. Select your Slow Redraw. Now, within the software, you can vary the speed with this tool right here, so slow it down as much as you can. You can also execute the design one stitch at a time with this button. So you can go through it one stitch at a time, or you can slow redraw. Well, you know what you do at this point? Watch it slow redraw. Because you know what you're watching me do, folks, now? You're watching me digitize. You saw where I began the running stitch. You saw how I moved through the design with the running stitch, and now you're watching the execution of the top stitch, the satin stitching. You're watching me digitize. In fact, you know what? I actually taught myself this process by running a Zunt design. When I got involved in this industry, one of the things I was very, very impressed with was the lace making that I saw. And as I researched it, my favorite lace maker at that time, and still to this date, is Urban Zunt of Zunt Designs. If you've never seen his website, it's Zunt, Z-U-N-D-T Design, singular.com. Well, when I first was taken to his website and I saw his design, I was overwhelmed. A long story short, I began communicating with Urban Zunt. He has since become a very, very dear friend. He is a master lace maker. And I was running one of his designs one day, and I said to myself, if ever given the opportunity, I would love to sit next to Urban Zunt and learn about his lace making. It had been, at that point, probably 30 years since I had digitized the lace design personally. I felt I needed a refresher course. I watched his designs run on my machine. They were indeed magnificent. And I thought that, if ever given the chance, I'd love to learn from him. But then I realized I had his design in my software. And I did basically just what you saw me just do. I brought his lace design up on the screen. I measured the length of his underlay. He uses, just like me, underlays of 3 millimeters, 3 to 4 millimeters. Length equals loft. Lace needs to be a lofted process, so he uses a fairly elongated running stitch. I set my running stitch to 3 millimeters at that time. I went to a straight edge of his satin stitching, and I measured his density. Lace is a fairly bold stitch technique. Urban uses densities. He uses variables, but in that design, he used a 0.4 density. I went into my satin stitching, and I set the density to 0.4. I then watched that lace design slow redraw 5, 6, 7 times till I felt comfortable. I call that technique pathing, P-A-T-H-I-N-G, basically the pathing of a master. I saw where he started his underlay. I saw that he did 4 to 7 revolutions of an underlay completely underneath the top stitching. That's what makes lace lace. Lace is a continuous filament of thread. I saw where he started his underlay. I then saw where he began to execute the satin stitching. Lace also has no trims. Lace is a continuous filament of thread. I watched it slow redraw 5, 6, 7 times, just as I would do with this design. You measure stitch length. You measure stitch density. You watch the design slow redraw. Then you know what I did, folks? I left it on the screen. And I actually asked for the software to do this when we developed the software. Leave that design on the screen. At this point in time, go down to your color bar, select another color. Come up and grab your running stitch. Right on top of that stitching then, I began to digitize. I now use his stitches as you're seeing me do here. I'm using my stitches as simply a path, a place where I know I need to place the stitches. And what I've just done here in just about 10 seconds is, folks, I've just duplicated my own underlay right down to the exact same stitch length. And I'm sorry, I did not change the color on that, so I'll go ahead and select the right color. So I duplicated my underlay. At this point in time, I then grabbed, as I'll do now, the satin stitch. So I grabbed the satin stitch. And if you watch this design slow redraw, you'd see that this satin stitching was executed just like this. I did this through that entire lace design because I had measured his running stitch underlay and knew the length, because I measured his density, knew the density, and set both values the same within the software, and because I watched it slow redraw, I was able to, right on top of that design, digitize in the exact same sequence. When I was done, I deleted his and I ran mine. You just sat with Walter Floriani. Folks, there are no secrets in this embroidery process once you learn to measure. You simply measure length, you measure densities, you watch design slow redraw to see how any given technique is executed, leave it on the screen, and duplicate it. You can teach yourself. Do you all fully understand what this can bring to you within Floriani software? You can teach yourself lace making, fringing, blending, bleeding. There are no secrets in this process, folks, once you learn to measure. Now, I'd like to address for another moment, or to get back to it, the free stock embroidery design that you get. Now, I say in my classes, why do we provide, or why do I give you free stock embroidery design? Is it because I'm a nice guy? Well, yes. You know what? I try to be a nice man, and indeed, I like the fact that we give you free designs every month. But the major reason why those designs are provided for you, again, is an amplified learning curve. Look, even without measuring, this simplifies it and amplifies it tenfold. Watch what I'm talking about. Embedded in the software is also a wonderful design library. Coming down here to the bottom right, you'll see Sequence View and Design Library. Click on your design library to implant designs into the library. Look, just look under previous updates. You'll see that the design library was a feature added into the software. It will tell you step by step how to import designs into it. You don't have to import them singularly. You can import entire blocks of designs. You know what? Here's a design embedded in the software for you. I'm going to go ahead and pull this tiger design up on the screen. Whenever you pull a design out of the library, if the design is completely highlighted, it's telling you that that design is grouped. So once you bring it on the screen, simply right-click and say ungroup. That breaks it down into singular elements, okay? And I'm going to go back into the sequence view. Well, let's say you ran this embroidery design. I'm going to go ahead and with this icon give it a 3D effect. But let's say you ran this design, and we'll just talk about this grass down here. Let's say you ran this design, you watch that grass run, and you go, my gosh, that effect, it's amazing. That is an amazing effect. I would love to utilize that effect in my own digitizing. Well, the company, and again, why we have contracted with the Digitizing Depot and why we created that company, and that is a Floriani company. We've contracted, but basically that is ours. When you purchase a design through Digitizing Depot, those designs come to you in the C2S format, meaning they come to you in the outline form that we write our designs in within the software. So you run that design. You watch that technique. It's amazing. It really looks like grass, for gosh sakes. You want to utilize that technique in your own digitizing. Well, number one, in the sequence view, locate that color or locate that area. Select on it. you'll see I've selected that. At this point in time, you see the little plus sign next to the color. Click on that plus sign to open it up, and right off the bat, you'll see that they used a complex fill to create that effect. Click on your complex fill. And you know what, folks? Look right up here in your properties box, because what you now have up here is the entire story to that technique. You'll see that this digitizer, he or she, used a standard effect fill with a random technique. They used a stitch length of 3 millimeters. They used a density of 0.65. Click on the underlay. You'll see that they used a contour and a perpendicular underlay. Click on the next tab, your pull and your push. You'll see they used an absolute value of pull compensation on both sides with a value of 0.3. Click on general. You'll see they used a chiseled end with a chiseled distance of 0.4. Every element of that technique is now right before you. It's even simpler than measuring because it gives you the complete, total story of that technique. Well, you know what? Want to use that technique in your own digitizing? You'll click on your complex fill. Remember, what they used was a standard effect with a random technique. Select random. They used a stitch length of 3 millimeters with a density of 0.65. Under underlay, they used a contour and a perpendicular underlay. Under pull compensation, they used an absolute value of 0.3 on both sides of it. Just continue on. Let's click apply on that. Under general, they use a chiseled effect with a 0.4. You can go on and into the commands, every element of that. You know what? You click your complex fill, select your color, create any complex fill. You just duplicated that technique right down to the same exact effect. Same stitch length, same density, same underlay. What an additional learning curve for you. That's why those designs are there. Absolutely, it would provide you some nice new designs, but it's the learning curve, folks. Having a design before you and with that information available to you, that's why as you look through those designs, we're trying to cover an amazing variety of techniques, redwork type design, logo style of design, a wildlife style of design, nature style of design. We're trying to bring to you a variable group of designs that the learning is just never going to stop. It's never going to stop. I think that is an amazing new aspect. I'll get off on my little rampage here and we'll move on. What I'd like to now explain is a little bit of the digitizing tools or the digitizing tools within your software. Now, indeed, many of you, when you begin to digitize, are going to be using the segment or the magic wand. First of all, I want to discuss very quickly the importing of your artwork. There are basically a variety of different artwork types that you can work with. Under File, you'll see that you have Import Artwork, you have your Import True Type Text, you have Load Backdrop, and Twain Scanner. Certainly, you can scan designs in. Hooked up to a scanner, hit Twain Scanner, you'll select your input, your scanner, scan your design in. Load Backdrop. For all of your backdrop files, and those are your JPEGs, bitmaps, TIFFs, and such, those are pixelated files. Those are all done with Load Backdrop. By clicking on Load Backdrop, again, you'll bring up all of your JPEG images, your bitmaps, and such. Want to bring a design in, just click on it, click Open, and it'll come up. Floriani software, though, also works with vectorized artwork. That's artwork prepared in like Adobe Illustrated, in graphic programs. If you have a piece of vector artwork, it is done under File and Import Artwork. Under Import Artwork, you can now import vectorized designs. Now, you'll notice a couple of differences when you bring in vectorized files. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close what I have open up here right now so I can kind of key in on just these two styles of artwork. I want to show you a few things. First of all, I'm going to again address your bitmaps, JPEGs, and such. So that would be under File and Load Backdrop. We also have a shortcut key for you right down here on the left-hand side in your editing tools, you have what's called a backdrop tool. That's why clicking File, Load Backdrop. It's a shortcut. Click on it, and again, it's like hitting File and Load Backdrop. Bring in your basketball design. We'll just go ahead and bring that in. Click Open. It's on the screen. Now, no matter what type of artwork you bring in, one of the rules to digitizing, and certainly as I'm teaching you this, I've got to cover some of the aspects of digitizing. And one of the rules when you first import your graphic is finished size. When you begin to digitize, you always have to determine what stitch type you're going to use. All right? Every element of the design, you have a choice. Is it going to be a running stitch, a satin stitch, or a fill stitch? You're only going to be able to choose the proper stitch type for every element of a design when you have the finished size on. So the very first thing when you import your artwork, set your finished size. Again, you'll see that I'm set metrically. I work metrically. I think in inches. I size in inches. So I'm very quickly going to come over to the left area over here to that margin, right-click, toggle over to inches. You'll see I'm now in inches. It's 1.72 inches. Not big enough. Let's say we want to make that a 3-inch design. Click 3, click Apply. So now I'm set to the correct size. I've sized my design. Now I want to determine what stitch type. Look again, this was an update we did to the software, but I think it's an amazing feature to Floriani software to determine stitch type. Pick your ruler. Go to any area of the design. I'm going to jump back to metric again, and I'm going to measure. So I'm going to measure that orange, measure across it. It's telling me it's 33 millimeters wide. Look to the right of that. It's telling you, use a fill stitch. Floriani software is the only software in the world that when you measure the element, it tells you exactly what stitch type to utilize. So we measured the stitch type. I'm going to use a fill stitch. What are we going to use in the black? I'm going to use a satin stitch. So bring a design in, scale it to the finished size, measure to determine stitch type, and again, most of you or many of you are going to begin to digitize with the magic wand. So to do that, I would pick my complex fill stitch. I'll select up here my magic wand. I'm going to come down and right-click on the color, the orange that I want to digitize. You do that with a right-click, digitizing again. This is the segmented auto-digitizing. I simply, at this point, left-click, right-click, it's done. Left-click, right-click, it's done. Left-right, 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 it's done. Now, I actually never change back to my default values. I have to open up a density. Even when you're digitizing, you want to change density and such, you can always just select the entire color, come right up here. I actually wanted just a tatami effect in this, and I want a density of 0.4, and it'll change it, excuse me. Then hit the decimal point, change it to 0.4, click Apply. I can alter the density just that quick. So I've digitized that fill stitch. I then will grab my satin stitch. I don't have black on the color bar. To change to black, I can left click on the purple right there. I now get my thread chart. I can left click on black, click OK. I now have black on the color bar. I can right click on the color black. Once again, I've grabbed my satin stitch to make sure the magic wand is activated at this point. The magic wand is indeed. I've picked the black, left click, right click. The design is digitized. That's how many of you are going to digitize. Now, I brought that up because I want to show you now in creating a design with vectorized art the difference very quickly. First of all, when you're working with vectorized art, again, File, Import Artwork, the first thing that you're going to notice when I bring in this design, Floriani software originally was an artwork program converted into digitizing program. It sees vectorized art as artwork. So the first thing that you'll notice is over here on the right, I've already generated, or I have a sequence view. But if I open up the sequence view, you see it as just artwork. It'll state it's artwork, okay? So I'm just artwork. I'm going to go ahead and do a selection. I'm going to go into transform because it isn't size. Again, I'm going to try and jump back to inches. And this design is only a ½ an inch tall. I want this to be in width, let's say 4 inches wide. I simply change one value, click Apply. Whoops, excuse me, I didn't select the entire design. select the entire design, go to transform, let me tell it it's 4 inches wide, click apply, I've sized the design. Now, in order to digitize this design, I'm going to go ahead and number one, I'm going to select the blue. So I'll click on that, it selects that blue. Well, I can grab my complex fill, but I can't grab the magic wand. Why? When you're working with vectorized art, you cannot utilize the magic wand. There's a very simple explanation if you've run into this with vectorized art. When graphic designers draw within graphic programs, not all of them, but many of them do a process that we call layering. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off this color. I can do that just by clicking on the eyeball. I'm going to turn off that blue. You see what you see behind the blue? You see black, okay? This is layering. When graphic artists create a design, many times they'll look at that black outline and they see it as an entire background of black. It's easier for them to create. So they lay an entire square or entire image of black. Then they layer the colors on top of it. That's why we do not give you the ability to use the magic wand. If we gave you the ability to use the magic wand, you would select that black. You would come up and pick your satin stitch. And then if we gave you the ability to use the magic wand, oh my gosh, you'd probably lock up the system because it would try to do that entire, it sees all of that black. Very simply, I'm not going to get carried away with it. That's why you can't use the magic wand. But what we did give you is basically magic wand digitizing. I select the color just by coming over to the sequence view. At this point in time, I can right-click and I can simply say convert to a complex fill, and boom, it can be done just that quickly, okay? So you can digitize in that manner with the software. But let me explain something. DJ and I were discussing this before the class tonight, and we figured this out, and this is really kind of cool. Check this out, folks. When you're working with vectorized art, because it is indeed auto-digitizing, because it sees vectorized art in such a clean manner, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a new page, and I'm actually going to go into the auto-digitizing icon. Here's auto-digitizing over here on the top right. I click on it, okay? I'm going to browse, and I'm going to find that design. I've already got that airplane selected, and I'm going to click Open. Then I'm going to click Next. At this point in time, I'm going to set the sizing. So again, we're just going to set this to 4 inches wide. So I've sized it. I hit Next. Now going to show me all of the colors within the design. You know what? At this point in time, I'm simply going to hit Finish. For some reason, when you're working with vectorized art through auto-digitizing, it ignores the layering. It sees just the outlines of the structure. I don't know why, but it does, and it's really quite amazing. Now, let me explain. It's going to generate. That design is basically digitized. Now, a few things with this design. Number one, the green area here. It did it in satin stitches. I really don't want that to be like that. So you know what I can do? I can select that green, okay? I can right-click, and I can convert that to a complex fill. Because it sees it as vector art, it sees the entire outline of the structure. So instead of doing it all in little pieces of a complex fill, it did in one complete complex fill. I could do the same thing up here in the red. It did it in a satin stitch. If I wanted that to be a fill stitch, I can simply select that. I can right-click, and I can say convert to a complex fill. So not only does it ignore the layering, you see an area not digitized correctly, click on it, convert it to the proper stitch type. Stitch types in auto-digitizing, whether it chooses satin, fill, or running, is again based on width. Those areas, width-wise, it saw satin stitching. It implanted them as satin stitching. But you do have the ability to select it and convert it to the proper stitch type, in this case, a complex fill. And you're done with the digitizing in that manner. That's awesome. That's awesome. What I was doing previously was I was taking the vectorized art, converting it to like a bitmap or a JPEG using the magic wand. With this method, it now supersedes it for me. I'm going to let auto-digitizing convert it. I'm going to grab the individual elements, and I'm going to convert them to the stitch types that I want. I think that's amazing. Look, playing with the software, my father always maintained a process. He always said to me, son, make a little time to take a little time to play. Playing with the software, and that's what DJ and I did. We sat here for 30, 40 minutes before the class tonight. We started playing. I said, DJ, I'm going to cover importing artwork. The issue that I've always had with vector art is this. We start playing. All of a sudden, DJ says, hey, Walt, look at this. And boom, figures that out. A little bit of a playtime or a little bit of playtime within the software. I've always done that. When I owned my digitizing company, I used to give my entire crew of digitizers 30 minutes to an hour a week just to play. Do something within the software that kind of knocks my socks off. The techniques and the abilities that we were able to develop because of a little bit of playtime staggered me. It always did. I maintain the same thought process with this software. I make a little time to take a little time to play. 30 minutes, we figure that out. That's something I'll utilize with my personal digitizing every time I'm working with Vectorworks. You know what? It might not always work, but it's where I'm always going to start now, folks. I think that's amazing. Look, I'm running out of time. I've got quite a bit I still want to cover. First of all, your digitizing tools up here at the top. Not only do you have Magic Wand digitizing, you certainly have all your individual stitch types. I'm going to quickly explain. You have your manual stitch. Manual stitch is simply one stitch at a time digitizing. When I select it, every place that I left click, whether it be a very short stitch or an elongated stitch, I'll generate the needle penetration points. It drops the stitch at those points. Manual stitching is just that, one stitch at a time digitizing. Will probably be the stitch type that you utilize the least amount, but basically when you're manual stitching, you're going back over 130 years in the digitizing process. Since the inception of embroidery, all we had was the manual stitch. Every stitch in every design used to be programmed one stitch at a time. You have that ability within the software. You certainly have your running stitch. Within your running stitch, you select it. You set a stitch length. You do have the ability in running stitching to choose standard. That's a single running stitch. Two-ply, double running stitch. Bean is a 3-time running stitch. Your red work is done with a 3-time running stitch. But you can also apply your motifs and your symbols to the running stitch. So I'll pick standard, okay? I picked my running stitch. Let me grab another color. I'll left click here. Doesn't matter how long I make that running stitch. When I left click and then right click to end the sequence, it proportionally drops exactly 3 millimeter stitches along that running stitch. By selecting it again, single, double, triple, but with all your running stitching, you can apply your motifs. You have an entire series of motifs within Embroidery Suite. Select the motif, select apply. It'll apply those motifs along to that running stitch line. You also have the ability to apply your symbols. You have an amazing variety of symbols within the software. Symbols you can use for running stitching. You can also use for bordering within your appliques. You can select your symbol. I can select just an anchor. I can vary the sizing on it. I can click apply, and I can now implant anchors along those that running stitch line. So again, single, double, triple, motifs, and symbols. You have your satin stitching, and there are a variety of satin stitching. The first one is called your input satin path. With an input satin path, I'll simply do a letter I. I'm going to define the top left of the letter I with a left click, the bottom left of the letter I. I'm then going to right click to get to the bottom right. I'm going to left click to signify the bottom right of the letter I. I'm going to left click for the top right of the letter I, and then a right click, boom, it generates the stitches. Input satin path. You define one side with left click, a right click to go to the other side, and then reverse it. Define from now what would be the last stitch, bottom right, up to the top right. Right click generates the stitches. All right? That's your input satin path. That's the one you're going to be working with the majority of the time. Next to that, and some of you may wonder why I've put in there what's called the classic satin. The classic satin, for those of you who may come from my era of digitizing, satin stitching, when computerized, was always done with something called point counterpoint. So to do that same letter I in a classic satin, I'm going to define top left of the letter I, top right of the letter I. Then through a sequence of point, counterpoint, I'm going to define the letter I. Let me explain this, and then with a right click I end the sequence and it generates the satin stitching. Again, come from my era of digitizing, we were used to the classic satin. That's why I implanted it in there. I wanted to create a comfort zone. When people who purchased the software from my era had that ability. Why I say it will be the one you'll use the least is because when you use the classic satin, you are the angle of the stitching. So like to do a letter L, I'll do a point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. But see, now I'm angling into the corner of the letter I, of the letter L. You are the angle. I don't have artwork on it, so it's kind of rough. And then a right click generates the letter L. But angles are very important in embroidery. If you understand angling, I have no issue with classic satin being utilized. Why I say use the input satin path, we changed the logic on how it did curves. We use a function called fractional spacing. It makes soft corners, basically what I call, when I teach it, I'll angle in and angle out. The same letter L done with an input satin path, I'll select it. I do the top left of the letter L, bottom left. I come over to the bottom on the far right side of the letter L. I use a right click to get over or to get to now the inner line. Left click, come in and do a left click. Come to the top and do a left click, right click. But you see how it does this wonderful angle in and angle out. Use your input satin path the majority of the time. It controls the angles automatically. You'll never bird nest when you do that. It's soft angling. You then have next to that classic satin what's called a steel stitch. Steel stitch is another adaptation of the satin stitch, but you simply input it like a running stitch simply by clicking basically through the center of a structure. Right click generates a satin stitch, but the steel stitch is an exact width. It's all the same width. You select your width, it does all of the satin stitching that exact width. Next to that, you have your complex fill. Click your complex fill, do a series of simple left clicks. I do not need to generate this last one. It sees that line from there to there. Right click, and I've got my fill stitch. A couple neat things about the fill stitch, and I'll go ahead and select it. You do have a variety of effects. You have everything from brick, horn, different patterns, random, smooth, tatami. You can affect different effects. You can certainly control, again, your densities within it, so I can change it to anything that I want. But kind of neat with the fill stitch. With complex fill stitching in Floriani software, you also have the ability to use your motifs. First of all, I'm sorry, you have embossing. Embossing creates these really neat effects. Click an embossing pattern, apply it. When you make it look 3D, you'll now pull that effect within your fill stitch. But with fill stitching, you also have the ability to use your motifs. You can apply motifs to it. You can also apply what's called contour stitching. Contour stitching scrolls out from the center. You can vary the densities to create different effects. You also then have your stippling effect. Stippling is now within the software. You can stipple, all done with the complex fill. Next to the complex fill, you have your applique tool. You create applique simply by creating any shape with an applique. The only thing with the applique, what you're doing is you do need to close or finish the structure with a final left click and right click. You have your applique. It will put in your placement line, your tack down line, automatically insert your stop. You have all your variables here, your width, your placement line, tack down line, everything is done there. A complete complement. You also have under commands, you have fabrics. So you can now apply different fabrics and actually implant them in. Excuse me, you got to select, come under commands. You can select different fabrics and apply it. You can put in different fabrics. But since the development and the creation of the Floriani's new Apple-Stitch or R&K's new Apple-Stitch materials. Apple-Stitch is a material you can use for creating appliques. It is the material you use, but Apple-Stitch is a digitizing technique. It was automated and implanted in your software. Again, you do the design just like you do any traditional applique stitching. You complete it. With a left click, you have Apple-Stitch. Apple-Stitch puts a running stitch to the internal point. Why? Apple-Stitch is revolutionary, folks. You lay a piece of material down. There's no need to pre-cut your appliques. Lay a piece of material down. It's hard to explain, but I'm going to do my best. Lay a material down. The material will be sticking on the outside of your applique. The design runs. When you're done, you pull it off like a piece of tearaway. There's no debris to the outside. It's appliques made easy. You get a chance, my gosh, view it from the My Floriani Today page. You'll see the new Apple-Stitch, the technique, the materials, the designs we've created for it. But a neat thing also embedded in your software by selecting it under your commands. DJ is also implanted in the software all of the Apple-Stitch materials. Want to use, let's say, the tan leather, click on it, click apply, puts those materials in there. It's amazing. It truly is an amazing series of materials, an amazing new technique, been automated for you. Now, let me show you another thing. Embedded in the software is a whole series of pre-made applique shapes. Click on it, pick any applique shape that you may like. You know what, I'll go ahead and pick this, this dove. Bring it up. It's an applique, okay? But it's a traditional applique. Once it's generated, you can right-click on it. You can now convert it right to your Apple-Stitch. It'll convert it right to your Apple-Stitch, put it right in there. Again, you can select it, click Commands, can then come in, pick your applique material. Let's go ahead and just, I'd probably use the tan in there again, apply it, and there you go. So all of the pre-made applique shapes can very simply be converted to your Apple-Stitch materials. You've got a couple more tools here, or basically one more tool. You do indeed have your cross stitch. You do it just like a fill stitch, boom. You've got cross stitch within the software. Those are your individual stitch types. You do have an artwork tool. You can access your symbols right up here. You've got your magic wand digitizing. Then, of course, you've got your texting, your monogramming, your text design, your monogram design, your auto digitizing, motif shapes, and your applique shapes. I want to take a minute, just discuss very quickly your editing tools. I'm already over time, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to pull a little rank and keep going. I'm going to bring up that same WeAre1. Look, this is a stitch file. It's a DST file. It's a design not digitized within the software. One of the highlights of Floriani software, without a doubt, is the editing. It's the highest level of editing that I've ever seen in a piece of software. We worked over a year in developing the software's ability to work with existing data. Number one, want to change, let's say, the density to the entire design? Select the entire design. Right up here, it's a standard satin stitch. Select your density. Want to lighten the density, change your density, click apply. You can lighten density to an entire design. But you've got more ability in that. To select individual segments within the design, use this select tool on the top left. Click select. I can then select any part. I can select just that part of that satin stitch. Want to change the density to just that element? I can change just that one element. You have absolute control. Boom. Change the density just to that one segment. The select tool is utilized for selecting individual elements within a structure. If I want to select the underlay, I can select, just get on it, select just the underlay. I can delete it. I can add. I can do whatever I want. So you have your select tool for selecting individual elements. When you want to select an entire structure, again, if I use the select tool, I click on that, it just picks that part of the W. Well, let's say I want to pick the entire W, but I don't want to pick the E or the rest of the lettering. Use your lasso tool. Grab your lasso tool, simply draw a circle, lasso around the W. Doesn't matter that I went over part of the E. I didn't lasso the whole thing. I did lasso the whole W, right click, it selects now the entire W. At that point in time, I can go in, I can change density to it. I can also go into the next element called shape. Let's talk a little bit about shape. Shape is an amazing tool. I'm going to go ahead and select just this part of the letter W. I'm then going to come into shape. Once you're in shape, you can control start points, end points. Software is color-coded, folks. Start points are always green, end points are always red. Want to move the end point? Move it where you want in the design. It's that quick. Right-click, it generates it. You can change angles. Angles are always your black points. Shape points are blue. I can change shapes. I have my Bezier curve. I can change shapes. Right-click takes effect. That's amazing. That's a stitch file. That level of editing can be done many times when you're digitizing within the software, but that's unheard of in almost all software, if all software, with stitch files. You have the ability with a stitch file. Change angle lines, change shape lines, move start points, move end points. It's amazing. If you want to work with just the shape, you can also right-click and you can say, look, I want to edit just the outlines. Now I can change shapes. If I want to work with just the angle lines, I can say edit just the angle lines. Now I'm in control of the angle lines. If I want to edit just the start and stop points, the entry exit, I have it. Move the exit point where I want, start point where I want, you have it. That's your shape. You have your zoom tool. Your pan, I use pan in my digitizing. You can pan through a design. You have your ruler. You utilize your ruler to determine stitch type. I also utilize the ruler to check the distortion values. I don't have time to go into that. I also use the ruler for when I scale. Take a design, blow it up in size. Let's say a lettering design. I blow it up maybe 400%. Well, many times when a satin stitch grows to more than 8 millimeters, 7 to 8 millimeters, it needs to become a fill stitch. So when I scale a design up, I look for the widest satin stitch. I use the ruler and I measure it. It's going to tell you what stitch type it should be. So I take like a small lettering, blow it up 400%. Maybe it should be a fill stitch. It's going to tell you. I can then select it, and right in the software, I can convert it right to a fill stitch by picking Tatami or one of the stitch type effects. I use the ruler for a variety of factors. You have your backdrop tool below that. You have your 3D effect. Clicking on it makes the design look 3D. Let me explain. 3D really works the best when you're looking at a design on a one-to-one basis. Otherwise, when you zoom in, it doesn't really look at that point that 3D. Yep, looks like stitches, but it doesn't really look that great. Below that, you have your grid. You can activate, bring up your grid. I'll talk more about the grid in future webinars. I also then have stitches. I can turn the stitches off where I'm working with just outlines. That many times helps a great deal when you're working in the shape feature. We certainly then, when not in a 3D mode, you have your stitch ends. I use the stitch ends an awful lot, especially when I'm measuring to learn how a digitizer created a design. But also, I'll use the stitch ends when I'm editing a lot in my stitch editing. And you know what? I didn't talk about that. I apologize. Underneath your shape tool, you do have stitch editing. You can go into stitch editing and now edit individual stitches, okay? You can insert stitches before it, insert stitches after it. We'll cover that more thoroughly in a future webinar when we get a little bit more into the technique. You have your commands below that. Clicking on the commands, you're going to see all the trims, all the movements. You can't hardly see it. Trims look like little scissors within the software. You have commands in your digitizing. Clicking on the command tool shows you the commands on the screen. Below that, you have your hoops, so you can actually generate the hoops within any given design. The backdrop tool is next. Look, if you bring a backdrop up into the software to digitize and you want to hide that backdrop, you use this tool right here. You'll then hide it to bring it back up, bring it right back up. Below that, you then have your flip horizontal, flip vertical, rotate left, rotate right. I have gone 15 minutes over the time.
Yes, you have.
I apologize, Kat. I do not know if we have time to even take some questions.
know, we do not, Walter, but I have to tell you, this was the best webinar. It was fabulous. It was so good, we didn't even get questions because they were mesmerized by the master.
Well, you know what, Kat? Look, there is, in loading the software, I really worked hard on this one. Again, in the webinar, I'm trying to be thorough. I really wanted to key in tonight on the educational aspects. I hope I did a good job doing that. I think with Floriani software, we have provided a level of education, again, with the workbook, the videos, the webinars, the forum, and the dealer classes that are second to none. But I would have been remiss not to take them a little bit into this advanced self-teaching method, and then those free stock designs. The learning curve is like nothing else in any other software. I hope I was able to get that point. Folks, I'm not bragging. I'm proud. I am so proud of my staff, our staff, that this magnificent group of people, all of us working on the software collectively to bring you, the users, in my opinion, the finest embroidery software ever developed in this world. I hope we've achieved that. We're not going to stop until it gets better, better, and better. It's our intent, it's our desire, it's our passion, it's our mission statement. I love you all. Hugs and stitches. I look forward to the next webinar. I hope you all enjoyed it. Good night, folks. I'll see you next time.